Good morning, everyone. Today is Friday, February the 26th, and this is the 34th edition of Book Fun Friday. As always, welcome. So, the young adult book I'm going to be talking about today is titled, I love the cover. It's titled The Beautiful Struggle, and it's written by the author Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is actually a memoir that has been adapted for young adult readers. He wrote a book, gosh, it's been 10 or 12 years ago, that's titled The Beautiful Struggle, his memoir, but that was more targeted toward adult audiences. Well, now that book has been revamped for YA audiences, and that's the book that I'm going to talk about today, and I'm really excited about that. So I don't usually do this, but I'm going to read the inside flap today just to give you an idea, a sense of the author's life growing up. As a child, Ta-Nehisi Coates was seen by his father, Paul, as too sensitive and lacking focus. Paul Coates was a Vietnam vet who had been part of the Black Panthers and was dedicated to reading and publishing the history of African civilization. When it came to his sons, he was committed to raising proud Black men, equipped to deal with a racist society during a turbulent period in the collapsing inner city of Baltimore where they lived. Coates details with candor the challenges of dealing with his tough-love father, the influence of his mother, and the dynamics of his extended family, including his brother, Big Bill, who was on a very different path than Ta-Nehisi. Coates also tells of his daily struggles at school and with girls, making this a timeless story to which many readers will relate. So let's unpack a little bit of that. So the flap mentions that he grew up in Baltimore, and Ta-Nehisi actually describes it himself here as the part of Baltimore that was not hood, but was also not suburban. So it meant that he had a home, he had food, he had security, he had parents, he had siblings. There was a lot of stability around him. But because they weren't as refined, say, as the folks who lived in the suburbs, there were some rough edges around his growing up life, including constantly having to fight, and I mean like physical fist fight, with other boys in his neighborhood. That was just the thing. You went out with a group of friends who usually ended up meeting with a different group of guys, and for whatever reason, they often ended up being in fistfights. And it's basically to defend their honor, to show how bad they were, how tough they were, how strong they were, how you would not take advantage of them or run over them. And that mindset was actually encouraged by Ta-Nehisi's father. Now, the flap also mentions that his father was quite tough love parent, and that's true. His dad was as apt to sit him down and give him a lecture about something as he was to pull his belt off and whip him. That's just how he was with his kids. Now, his mother was a different sort of person. His mother's vision for her children was that they would grow up, graduate high school, and then go on to college, and specifically to Howard University. And this is why she was so intent on Howard. For a long stretch of time, Ta-Nehisi's dad worked at Howard University, and there was a thing at that time, it may still be a thing today, but there was a thing at that time that if you were an employee of Howard University, and it didn't matter if you were a professor or a janitor, it just didn't matter. If you were employed there, your children could go to Howard for free. And Ta-Nehisi's mother keyed on that and decided that was the path that she wanted their children to take. She wanted them to grow up, graduate high school, and then they would all go to Howard. Well, Ta-Nehisi had some different ideas about that. He wasn't 100% sure about college anyway. He was a dreamer. He liked reading comics, that kind of thing. So college wasn't necessarily in his future until he came to that point in his life where he was about to graduate high school, and it had to, a decision there had to be made. Last thing you need to understand, his dad believed that when you turned 18, you were out of the house. And so that further impacted his being pushed to make a decision about what it is that he would do for his life. So I'm going to share a couple of passages, of course, like I always do. This is toward the end of the book, but you get an idea there of him having to, at that point where he's having to make some decisions to launch himself into his future. Dad and Ma believed 17 was an internship to manhood. I love that line. Remember what I said, 18 you're out, so 17, that's the internship year to manhood. That at that point, the child would be what he was. This was my senior year, the first time no one checked my homework, asked if I had studied, or requested progress reports from school. I came in with a 1.8 GPA. Colleges would require a series of awesome labors. Still, I was blessed with some understanding of standardized tests and thus SAT scores that, at least in Baltimore, stood out. And my advanced classes had softened my landing here in my senior year. I had 3 classes after lunch: health, Spanish 1, and applied math. I showed my respect by sleeping as much as I could and pulling B's on pop quizzes. The classrooms were crowded and tight. The last thing a teacher wanted was to make me into an issue. They left me to my afternoon nap. I left them to their restless kids. Okay, so you sort of get an idea here about what's happening as he's facing this prospect of turning 18, having to leave the house, make some decisions about school, that kind of thing. So then this last part that I'm going to read, he's actually been accepted at some other colleges, and he's thinking very seriously about attending Morgan State, which is in Baltimore. Remember, he's living in Baltimore there, but don't forget, his mama really wants him to go to Howard University in Washington, D.C. So there's some push-pull there at this point. This last passage I'm going to share. Back when I first got conscious, now that's conscious with a capital C. Remember in the front part of the book when I read about his dad was determined to raise his children with a clear understanding of African history. That understanding is getting conscious. So back when I first got conscious, the Mecca, that's Howard University, seemed natural, the only place to bring me into line. But with each failing year of school, I lowered myself, once to the point that I didn't even think a college would take me. True, the Mecca was only an hour away, and there were drummers in Chocolate City. Let me hit the pause here real quick. At some point in high school, Ta-Nehisi started playing drums and just fell in love with this group he was with and making music and that kind of thing. And so when he mentions there about Mecca was only an hour away and there were drummers, Chocolate City is a reference there to Washington, D.C. He's considering that bridge action, right? So he can take the drumming with him into his future. But the bond I felt here, this is Baltimore, was more than music. It was an enveloping community, a circle so tight that it reverberated in me, even when I was gone for days. What I knew even then was that I would never be in love like that again, was that nothing that healthy would ever feel, that carnal, lush, and complete. I'm going to Morgan. Remember, that's the Morgan State there in Baltimore. I'm going to Morgan, I told my parents. They were sitting down in my father's office. My mother gave a speech about opportunity and responsibility. Dad sat back with his patented face of stone and just listened to me and Ma go back and forth. At the end, he placed his palms on his lap and said, "Son, it's your choice. You're grown. You can make up your mind." I walked out of the office with a full smile. How I ever thought I prevailed, how I ever thought that I would win against my mother, is beyond me now. I had turned it around, but not so much that I was scholarship worthy. My parents would still be carrying the bill. And I was in the burgeoning class of kids whose families made too much for financial aid, but not enough to make tuition payments anything less than a war. We had two more conversations. In the first, Dad continued the charade of options. Son, it's still your choice, but your mother is my woman. And son, she has power. I think she's right, but you're grown and can make your own decision. I'm trying to let you know that, but your mother, son, your mother has power. I want to go to Morgan, I told him. Okay, son. But by the next week, he was flipped. We were in his office again. My mother had that thin smile like, you know what this is. The conversation was short. My dad said, Ta-Nehisi, you're not going to 13th grade. That, in other words, you're not going to stay in school here in Baltimore. And just like that, it was done. All over again. I was exiled from home and destined for Mecca, Howard University. Or this is what I saw. Fact was, I was only months from 18, and I could have done what I wanted. I was split on leaving Baltimore, and the wishes of my parents were an easy out. I did not know then that this is what life is. Just when you master the geometry of one world, it slips away. And suddenly again, you're swarmed by strange shapes and impossible angles. And again, this is titled The Beautiful Struggle, and it's written by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It's his memoir, adapted for young adult readers. Well, guys, thank you as always for watching. February has been fun. I really enjoyed digging into books by Black authors that feature Black characters. And this one specifically is written by a Black author about himself and his experiences growing up as a young Black man in Baltimore. So this has been a great study here. I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed presenting it. Continue taking care of yourselves and staying well. I hope you're all able to get vaccinated soon if you haven't already. Take care, and I will see you next Friday for the next edition of Book Fun Friday. Bye.